Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Parsha webcast. Today's class is being sponsored by Barry and Sharon Schechter in honor of Barry's mother, Edith Schechter, Yehuda's Bas Hindel Perel, who is undergoing a surgery tomorrow, and we pray for her refuah shalema, her speedy recovery, and should all go well. Amen. And in merit of the Torah that we're learning tonight in her schus, it should stand by her and cause her to be successful. And this is also being sponsored in honor of their son Evan, who is becoming 26 years old, I guess, today. So happy birthday and all the blessings from all of us to you. This week is a double portion, the portion of Vayakhel and Pekudei, the end of the book of Exodus, the two last portions. And the portion basically is a repeat of all the details of the building of the tabernacle in the desert. Now, what I mean by a repeat is as follows. In the portion of Teruma and Tetzaveh, 2 and 3 portions ago, God commanded Moses to tell the Jewish people to donate the materials and the money in order to build a Mishkan, and he gave him the instruction what he wants built. He wants an ark and how the ark should be made with his measurements, the breadth, how long it should be, how wide it should be, how tall it should be, what it should be made of. Then he goes on to the table, how that should be made, and again, the length, how wide, tall, all the different measurements, and then the menorah, its details, and the Mizbeach, the altars, and then the walls of the Mishkan, and the bars, and the rings, and the curtains, that the roofings that covered it, the whole tabernacle, and then the courtyard screening, and so on and so forth, with tremendous detail. In the portion of Tetzaveh, he said that they should, once the building is erected, they should make for the high priest and for his sons the vestments, the special clothing that they should wear when they do the service. And the high priest was supposed to wear 8 different garments, and the regular priest was supposed to have made for him 4 different garments. And again, he goes into tremendous detail of what these garments are made out of: purple wool and red wool and scarlet wool, and how they should be made, and the measurements. And it's a whole thing that is just with incredible detail that we hardly find in the Torah such detail about anything. In this week's portion, then last week we had the story of the golden calf. And now Moshe came down on Yom Kippur with the second set of tablets, and that day became the Day of Atonement. So finally he comes down, and we're all clean again, and we started to turn the new page, and we're all good. So now Moshe tells the Jewish people, go ahead and do what I was told, we're going to build a temple. So in this week's portion, and these 2 portions that we're going to read this Shabbos, it's literally a repeat of the entire thing that was, in other words, over there, it was God commanding Moshe what to do. In this portion and next, in these 2 portions, the Torah tells us that they went ahead and did it. And again, he goes through all that. They made the ark 10 feet, this cubits this way, 2 cubits that way, 2.5, with every single detail over again. We're talking about hundreds of verses. Hundreds of verses. So this in itself is a very interesting phenomenon, that in the Torah there should be such a largeness with verses and chapters and words, and something that is unprecedented before or after. I mean, after all, there are many laws in the Torah, biblical laws, that we learn out of one extra word that the Torah writes. One extra letter sometimes can teach us mountains of laws. So the Torah is so economical with words. And suddenly in these 4 portions, there's some kind of, it's like there's a flow of Just over and over with so much detail. Why? Why is that? So I once heard a nice word that goes like this. The question's even greater. The building that the Jewish people built over here was what? 20 cubits long, which is about 31 feet, by 15 feet or 16 feet wide. How much is that? It's not even as big as this room. Maybe it is. Is this 30 feet long? I don't even know if this, maybe it's not. This is, it's smaller than this room.
Tiles is 40 feet.
This thing,
This is 36 feet.
Bigger.
No.
Bigger. How many tiles?
18,
Count the
18
tiles.
tiles.
I'm sorry, it is, I'm going to tell you I made a mistake, it's 30 cubits, which is 45 feet long, the building, by 15 feet long. So let's say it's, whatever it is, it's not a very large place.
By 15 cubits?
By 15 feet, 16 feet, very, very
And all
small.
of Israel had to fit.
There's
a lot
No,
of
no.
description for a small-
Uh,
a lot of description, a lot of
very much description.
detail for a small room.
On the other hand, you go back to the word, to the beginning of the Torah, in the book of Genesis, in 32 verses, the Torah describes to us how God made the entire universe,
Right.
with everything in it. Over here we have about 150 to 200 verses, or more, maybe even more. Between the four portions, we're talking about probably 300 verses. At least 400 verses even.
Long service.
For one little room, for one little building. And in the Genesis, the Torah describes the whole creation of heaven and earth and everything in between in 32 verses. Does this make any sense to anyone? The answer which I once heard was that for God to make a home for man, which is not the biggest deal for him, so 32 verses is also a lot. But for finite man to create a home for an infinite God, that's a remarkable feat. That's a miraculous kind of event. For that, 400 verses shouldn't either be enough. That's a remarkable accomplishment. But that's not what I wanted to speak about today. What I want to speak about today is the three opening verses of this week's portion. And I'm going to read it to you, and we're going to elaborate on it. And Moses assembled the entire assembly of the children of Israel and said to them, when did he do this, by the way? The day after Yom Kippur. That day, he comes down the mountain. The next day, he assembled all the Jewish people, and he spoke to them and said, these are the things that Hashem commanded to do them. For a period of 6 days, work may be done, but the seventh day shall be holy for you, a day of complete rest for Hashem. Whoever does work on it shall be put to death. You shall not light fire in any of your dwellings on the Shabbos day. So the Torah points out, first he says, in the verse 2 he says, for a period of 6 days work may be done, but at the seventh day shall be holy for you, a day of complete rest for Hashem. Whoever does work on it shall be put to death. He says basically this is punishable by death. Then he goes in verse 3 and he points out among all, chooses one kind of prohibition. Out of all the 30, we know there are 39 categories of forbidden work that one is not allowed to do on Shabbos. Among them, of course, is lighting a fire. Yet, in the third verse, the Torah pulls that out of the category of work and says, this you shall not do. You shall not light fire in any of your dwellings on the Shabbos day. Well, you're not allowed to write either. You're not allowed to build either. You're not allowed to do anything. So why does the Torah point this out? That's a good question. Rashi answers that question. Rashi basically says, two opinions. It's a little complicated. Rashi said the first answer is not so complicated. First answer says that the Torah pulls out the prohibition of fire to tell us that while all other work you do, you'll be put to death, fire you will not. You're not allowed to do it, but it's not as severe in its punishment. That's why it was singled out. The other opinion holds, no, it's all punishable by death. There's no difference. Why did the Torah pull out fire? For the following reason. And this gets a little technical, and follow me on this. I said before there are 39 categories of prohibited work that one is not allowed to do on the Shabbos. I'll give you an example of 4. Okay? You're not allowed to cook. You're not allowed to write. You're not allowed to build. And you're not allowed to plow. Okay? Not allowed to plow, bake, write, and build. Okay? What happens if someone wrote on Shabbos by mistake? He forgot it was Shabbos. Forgot. He thought it was Tuesday. Or he forgot that you're not allowed to write on Shabbos. He didn't know. He knew it was Shabbos, but he didn't know you're not allowed to write. Does he get put to death? No, of course not. No, of course not. What does he have to do? This person has to bring a korban chatas, an offering in the temple to atone. For atonement, you made a mistake. Doesn't mean so you're not going to punish you, but atonement you need. You did a sin. So this is what you'll do. What happens if someone did a person, he wrote on Shabbos, 15 minutes later he built on Shabbos, 15 minutes later he baked on Shabbos, and 15 minutes later he plowed. So what does he have to do? No, we're talking about if he did it by mistake. If he did them all intentionally with witnesses and a warning, he gets put to death. You can only be put to death once. But what happens if he did it unintentionally?
Well, it's either 2 answers. It's either he has to bring one offering, or he has to bring
Or
an
4.
offering for each.
Oh. So the Torah tells us he separates the law of fire to teach us that each individual sin is seen as a separate entity.
So you wrote twice?
He didn't write it twice.
No, if you wrote twice. In other words, you did the same...
No, if you did the same thing, then you don't bring 2 offerings. But if you did separate types of categories of work, if you wrote and you plowed and you built and you killed the fire or whatever else, then for each one you have to bring a separate offering. It's not seen as it's one Shabbos and we count, we just look at you on Sunday, you messed up yesterday, come Sunday bring an offering. No, we look at each individual category of work.
So how does fire relate to that?
Oh, it's the point is that since he does separated fire from the general category of forbidden work, it comes to teach us that just like fire has now become a separate entity. It's in its own category. It's taken out of the general category, and we painted it or we described it as a sin in its own right. You're not allowed to fight fire. So each of the 39 take on the same category of independence, and if you did 4, 5, 38, 39 different types of work on Shabbos, one after the other, and you did them all by mistake, unintentionally, for each one you have to bring a separate atonement.
You yourself.
Yeah,
Can't
the person
do it
that did it.
community.
No, the person that did it, of course. So that's why fire is separated. Okay? But over here, the Torah tells us to teach us about the general category, that each category of prohibited labor on Shabbos stands on its own, and it's its own sin, its own sacrifice, its own atonement. But now let me tell you what the reason that the Torah tells us that you're not allowed to work on Shabbos. It's not as if the Jewish people didn't know you're not allowed to work on Shabbos till now. They were already, in fact, they were given the law of Shabbos twice before. once on the way out of Egypt, even before they arrived at Mount Sinai, in a place called Marah. They were told not to violate the Shabbos. If you remember where, when the manna began to fall, Moses, which was before the Mount Sinai, before they got the Torah, a few weeks earlier. What happened? Moses told them, my friends, there's a mitzvah Shabbos, and Shabbos is not going to fall, and you're not allowed to go out and collect it on Shabbos. And they already were told about Shabbos before. Then in the Ten Commandments, of course, they were told about Shabbos again. Mm-hmm. And in last week's portion, they're told about Shabbos a third time. And in this week's portion, they're told about Shabbos a fourth time. For crying out loud, why do the Jewish people need to have that many reminders? I know Shabbos is an important mitzvah, one of the most important, but again, how many times do you need to tell them? And why at this junction? So I want to examine with you for the next few minutes the wording here, because everything's in the details. Let's read this again. And Moshe assembled the entire assembly of the children of Israel and said to them, these are the things that Hashem commanded to do them. And in Hebrew he says, Sheishis Yomim Te'aseh Melacha, which means for a period of 6 days, work shall be done. But the 7th day shall be holy for you. So, number one, the simple answer to the question, why is Shabbos appearing over here again, is as the rabbis tell us, because he's telling us to build a Mishkan, so he wants to tell us, friends, sir, no, not on Shabbos. So he puts that right there as an introduction. Shabbos comes before. The holiness of Shabbos does not override the importance of building a Beis HaMikdash. Okay, that's an obvious answer. But there's another beautiful interpretation over here. What the Torah tells us over here is, I'd like to suggest that this one verse about Shabbos is more about the 6 days of the week than about the Shabbos. Let me explain to you why I say that. In other words, I think what the Torah, God is telling the Jewish people over here is not so much about observing Shabbos, but how to observe Sunday through Friday. What do I mean? So I'm going to examine the words with you very well. Who's a Hebrew expert here? You read it, you speak Hebrew. If you were if you're Moshe, and you are Moshe, your name is Moshe, if you had to come down off the Mount Sinai and gather the Jewish people, we're going to do a little exercise right here now. What would you say to us if you wanted to tell us that 6 days you should work and on Shabbos you should rest? What would you say? What words would you choose to tell us in Hebrew?
Avod shesh yamin.
Tavod shesh yamin, sheshet
Tabi
yamin.
shesh yamin.
Yeah.
Yom Shvi lo la'avod.
Okay. So you would say sheshet yamim ta'asu malacha. 6 days you should work and do your work, but on the 7th day you should rest. You should not work. That is not what Moshe tells the Jewish people over here. He should have told them sheshet yamim ta'asu malacha. 6 days you should do work. But let's read this again and pay attention. It says, Sheishet Yamim Te'aseh Melacha. What does Te'aseh mean?
What work will be done?
I say will do.
Te'aseh. Te'aseh. Not Ta'aseh, but Te'aseh. What does Te'aseh mean?
But the work will be done.
The work will be done. He's not telling you to work 6 days a week. He's telling you that for 6 days, work shall be done. Work will be done. Or better yet, work will be done.
Must be done.
No, not must.
Work will be done.
No, work will be done.
Work will be done.
Maybe not by
Let me
you.
explain to you what I think he means over here. Moshe is telling the Jewish people, he's not telling them about the Shabbos over here. They know about Shabbos already. What they really need to know is about Sunday through Friday. On Shabbos we know we're not allowed to work. But how do you work between Sunday and Friday? That we need to know also. So what's the approach? What is the attitude toward a Jew during the 6 days of the week? Well, we know we have to work, because if we don't work, we're not going to make a living. God created the world in such a way that He's, of course, the Birchas Hashem, God's blessing is the one that brings wealth. But God chose that His blessing of wealth should go down into this world, into your pocket, into your bank account, through a channel of natural means. He could have simply said, you all just sit around and play cards, and every morning open up the window, just like He told the Jews in the desert. Every morning the money will fall down from heaven, and it'll be right there for you to pick up. That's exactly what happened. Every morning they had manna waiting, just right there out there on their doorstep. Just put out your hand, pick it up, and you have yourself your meal. That's what happened in the desert. You could have done it that way also, all the time. Could have said, you can do whatever you want, you can learn Torah, you can play cards, go on vacation, just sit around, play golf, and every day dollar bills will fly into will be deposited into your mailbox. How's that for a plan? God could do that. There's no problem. You can make manna fall from heaven. You can make dollars fall from heaven. Why not? But He didn't want to do that. For whatever reason, He chose, I don't want to do that. I want to give you dollars are going to fall from heaven. But they're going to fall through a business. They're going to fall through a good customer. It's all falling from heaven. Nothing comes from yourself. It's all manna from heaven. But instead of falling at your doorstep while you're laying in bed, horizontally, no, you'll get up, you'll work, you'll toil, you'll sweat a little bit, and the dollars will fall down from heaven into your sale of a house, into your sale of a car, into your sale of a good customer that comes in for investments, whatever it may be. It's all coming from heaven, and we need to know that. But God wants you to open up a channel for Him. It's not going to happen like the manna anymore. That clear? Okay. Which means that obviously, if it's all falling from heaven, but just like about a half a mile before Earth it stops, and then looks. For Gary, what do? Your job, you're a professor. So it falls down right into the university, into their bank account, and it comes out in the form of a check to you as a payroll. A half a mile before Earth, it ends up in your office through a sale of a house or whatever it is. Just about a half a mile before it falls down right in front of your backyard, it goes through a channel of natural means. Which would mean that if a Jew woke up one morning and said, I can't daven today, I don't have time. Today I don't have time. Because I have to go make sales. It's a tough time out there. The economy is bad. So I'm going to tell, so right for this week I'm not going to daven. I can't, I'm sorry. Later, push it off to next week. Because it's just tough times out there. So you got to make, you got to go earlier to work and come later at home at night. And you have to make a bigger channel for God. Does that make sense to anyone? It does or it doesn't?
It happens.
Of course it doesn't.
It does.
It makes absolutely no sense. It does or it doesn't.
To me it makes.
To make a bigger channel for God, He can't fit it through your channel.
Well, evidently He wants it.
He doesn't want it. No, he to say, I'm going to not daven because I need to.
No,
that's what I'm saying. I'm not going to do what Hashem wants because I need to create for Him a bigger channel.
No.
Imagine a silly thing like that. Or I'll work on Shabbos to create a channel for God. It's an oxymoron. Total oxymoron. It's a contradiction of terms. So therefore, it's obvious that the work that we do during the week has to be within the realm of a regular channel that you have to create for God. How big of a channel do you have to create? How big?
Not much. Don't worry about it.
Basic. A basic channel. To go crazy with that channel, you don't have to go crazy with that channel. Yes, you have to work, you have to be, what's going crazy? 8 hours, 9 hours. In other words, as many as you need, as many as you could, but it should not compromise anything of what God wants from you. Because the minute you start compromising what God wants, you've lost sight of where the money is coming from. You completely lost sight where it's coming from. So for you to say, I'm going to work on Shabbos to create a channel for God, is insanity of the highest degree. It makes absolutely no sense. I'm telling you that I need you to open that business for me I want this pipe through which to send your dollars. So God, you're going to tell God, I'm going to create your pipe that you don't want. You imagine that? The whole reason you're creating a pipe is because God told you to create the channel, the pipe. So you're going to create him a pipe that he says, no, I don't want such a pipe. No, God, you need such a pipe. It's ridiculous. So the Torah uses language over here that's quite phenomenal. Te'osem alocha. 6 days, work shall be done. It doesn't say you should do it. Because the Torah doesn't want us to do it. What is the difference when you say you do it or it shall be done? It's a difference of attitude. Shall be done means, yeah, God needs me. The normal thing would be for the manna to fall down right on my doorstep. I shouldn't have to do anything. Because God can do that. What is he bothering me to go work for? He could be learning Torah. Wouldn't he rather me learn Torah all day long? No, he wouldn't. He wants you to work. Why? Because he wants to create an environment in this physical world for him where you work and you give tzedakah and you give charity 10% and you do what you have to and you deal honestly and so on and so forth. That creates a greater pleasure for God than Torah learned 10 hours a day. For whatever reason, that's him. That's the way he likes it. So he says you have to create this situation. You have to go out and work. But does he really want your whole head, your whole mind to be absorbed and sunken into the work? There's a famous story where Chassid once came to the fifth Rebbe, the Rebbe Rashab. And he asked him for a blessing for business, as Chassidim always do. And the Rebbe asked him, what do you do? So he described to him, he runs a boot factory. A boot factory. Okay, it's a legitimate business, very good. So he described the Rebbe, how it works and how he manufactures the boots, where he buys them, where he sells them, the whole thing from beginning to end. He went on and on and on. So the Rebbe told him at the end that he saw the guy, the chassid, was so into his business. The Rebbe told him, Rabbi Yudai, I'm seeing something today I never saw before. He says, for the last 50 years of my life, I've always observed feet in boots. But I never saw someone put a head into boots.
Very fun.
For someone to put his head into boots, this is what feet belong in boots, not a head, not heads. Heads belong into other things. So should you not think what you're doing when you're in your business? Of course you have to think what you're doing. What he's saying is this thinking and this thinking. This thinking and this thinking. Yes, you have to do the right, make 2 and 2, it has to equal 4, not 10. If you don't think, you're going to end up ruining the channel. So you need to use your head, obviously. But then there's using your whole head. To create a channel for God, do the minimum. Do what you need and put your head into what you really should be into. So the Torah says, Te'asem alocha, your work it's as if it's done by itself. Get it done, but don't put your whole life into it. Your whole head becomes absorbed, where there's no room for anything else. You watch business people. I've seen them, some of them. There's no space in their whole head for anything else. They're so absorbed is that they go home with it, they sleep with it, they wake up with it, they go to vacation with it, they go to the bathroom with it. There's never a moment where they stop thinking about it. Their kids come, they don't want to be bothered with them. They're tired. The kids suffer, the family suffers, the home, everything suffers. The person suffers.
But then they would
that's why the Torah doesn't say ta'as and malacha. Don't do work. You shouldn't be doing work. It should get done. In other words, get what has to be done, get it done, and move on. That's the point. Move on. Your head has to be somewhere else. So I believe, therefore, that these words over here is not so much about how to observe Shabbos. It's how to observe Sunday through Friday. The mitzvah over here is about the weekday, not about Shabbos. What kind of a yid are you going to be on Monday morning in your office? That's what this is about. It's not about Shabbos. Shabbos we know already. 3 times we heard about Shabbos in the Torah already. Over here he's telling you about Sunday through Friday. That you're not allowed to work on Shabbos, you know already. But that you're not allowed to become absorbed and work on Sunday to Friday, that no one ever told us before. That's what the Torah is telling us over here. It's more about the weekday than about Shabbos, these few verses. And it's important to understand that and to know that and to remember that. Never lose sight. That will do 2 things. First, it will make you a healthy human being. Your head will have time for other things. But it's other things. You'll always be cognizant of the fact that where do you get your sustenance from?
Sure.
It comes from God. In the desert, the Jews couldn't forget it because it was literally right at their doorstep. There was no one that was going to go say that I opened up a business that gave me money every morning at my doorstep. No one was silly enough to think that. That was obvious. Everything came from God. But because we have customers and publications and PR and everything that we do, and we went to school to learn a profession, and we think that we're great minds and great successes, and we create that. We really believe that. This is my doing. I'm really this talented. Look at so many talented people and look what they have on their table. They can't get their act together. Why not? They learned better than you. They're smarter than some of us. Because God didn't want it. The channel is, He's not sending it through those pipes. These people created large, big channels. They went to Yale. They went to Harvard. They went to the best and the brightest. And God gave them good heads. But God just doesn't want that channel to be a vehicle for success. So they can turn the world over and it just won't happen for them. So this is not about talents and it's not about intellect. It's not about hours. It's not about any of that. It's about this. What's your attitude towards work? This is what you got to think about. This is how we have to work. We have to work like Jews. Leave time for family, leave time for God, leave time for yourself. That's the channel that God wants you to create. Let the work get done. There's different tiers of levels within your own mind. The best part of your mind should not be in your boot factory or whatever other factory you're running. The best part of your mind should be in Torah, should be in God's business. Yes, you got to open up a business because that's what God created. He wants that world. He wants a natural world. Do it. Get it done. Don't put your whole head and whole soul and heart in it. Because it's not going to make you 1 red cent more by doing that. So you have to remember the manna stops right over here and then it looks for the channels. So create a channel that God needs. He doesn't need a big channel. He needs a channel. So create a basic channel. I'll tell you a story. With that I conclude. The Baal Shem Tov once went to a certain city to collect money for poor orphans and poor people, to marry them off or whatever else they did. And there was one rich man in the city. He was a miser. He would never give any money to anyone. So Baal Shem Tov heard that he is the rich man in town and he's got money, and Baal Shem Tov said, I needed to have whatever was 10,000 guildens, whatever it was there. So Baal Shem Tov walked over to the guy's house. And he knocked on the window. And he walked away. He knocked on the door and walked away. The guy got a knock. He comes to the window at the door. There's no one there. So he looked outside and he sees the Baal Shem Tov walking. So he ran after him, said, how can I help you? He ran after him to the end of the block. And he said, yes, I have an orphan that I need to prepare a marriage for and so on, whatever the need was. And I need you to give money. And he gave the money. So it piqued his interest. It's a funny thing, never happened to him before, you know. And the Baal Shem Tov asks, you give, you know, there's no... So the Hasidim later asked the Baal Shem Tov, I mean, what was that all about? Not kind of, if in other words, like this, if the miracle's going to happen for you, he was a miracle worker. If the 10,000 guildens were going to come to you in a miraculous fashion, why bother even going to that town? And if you're going to sit in shul and wait till he comes to the synagogue and you'll meet him there, he'll find you if it's going to work that way. If you make miracles, why do you even have to go to his house and knock on the door? So the Baal Shem Tov explained. He said, God doesn't want me to work with miracles. If you don't have to, you shouldn't. He wants me to create a channel. So I have to wake up and go to the rich man, to the source, down here for the money. But I have to go make an appointment and do all kinds of waste my time. A knock on his door is enough. That's enough. I went to him. I got his attention. The rest is okay. For the Baal Shem Tov, that can work. Okay. The Baal Shem Tov was a man that was in heaven more than on earth. So for him, the smallest channel is enough. For us, I wouldn't suggest that that the next time the UJA fundraiser wants to raise money for a project, should start knocking on windows and walking away. It's not going to work. So you have to create a normal channel, a real channel through the natural means. But to go meshuga, to go crazy, te'oseh malacha. Let the work be done. Don't involve your all levels of your seichel and heart and intellect and emotions in your business. There's no need for it. But that takes faith. It takes a lot of faith. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.